Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting. Information on how to watch, attend, and participate, as well as agendas, minutes, and recordings can be found on Broomfield's website at broomfield.org/council meetings. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name, neighborhood, and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. If you'd like to speak on more than one item on tonight's agenda, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. Public comment will be limited to 90 minutes total per item. The first 1 through 15 participants have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1 minute to speak. For our hard of hearing residents present, we have wireless headsets available in the back of the council chambers through our AV team. The City Council regular meeting is called to order. Council members Henkel and Leslie are excused. A quorum of the council is present. Tonight, we have some special guests here to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in welcoming the Brownies from Broomfield's Girl Scout Troop 65589, the Shooting Stars. These girls are currently working to earn their Democracy for Brownies badge. So, ladies, come line up. And whoever wants to start, we're waiting for you to lead. Go ahead. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all very much. You can go back to your seats now, or you can head out if you don't want to hang out for the rest of the meeting. Thank you for coming today. Well, I think your party's leaving. You probably need a ride, but thanks for visiting. All right, so thank you for our guests, and our future is in great hands with young civic-minded individuals like yourselves. Keep up the great work. In an effort to keep order for tonight's meeting, I ask council members to limit their comments to 5 minutes. If council members are given an opportunity to speak for a second time, they should limit their comments to 2 minutes. We'll plan on a 10-minute break at approximately 8 p.m. We'll begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Council may add or remove items from the consent agenda item, or council may revise the order of business for a meeting. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Seeing none, are there any objections to the agenda being approved? All right, the agenda is approved. There are no items under petitions and communications this evening. Does any member of the council have any reports or updates for us? See any hands? I do have just a quick one. On Saturday, we celebrated the 115th anniversary of the Depot Museum. And that is where the Crawford Honey House and Shep the Turnpike Dogs grave is. And what was going on was the Front Range chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution and our Broomfield Historical Society. They've been working on a storyboard. So outside the entrance to the Depot Museum, you'll see a new kind of a historical reference to what the buildings were and where they came from. And we just believe storytelling is an essential part of preserving our history. So there's also, it's a story of collaboration. It's how our community came together, local organizations, to make it possible. And I do want to give a shout out to our own David Allison, our city and county history coordinator, for his role in coordinating these efforts. So thank you all. Go check it out. It's really a cool addition. All right, we'll now continue with public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to engage on matters other than the items listed elsewhere on this evening's agenda. If there's anyone who would like to be heard, please come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please. Oh, the chivalry.
Two weeks ago, I asked if it was possible to extend an invitation to DA Mason to come and speak on a list of topics, including justification for the cost of DA services that are provided to the residents of Broomfield and why those costs have gone up so much. Ms. Rogers stated that an invitation was extended. Has the DA's office responded? And will DA Mason or a representative from his office be willing to speak to the people of Broomfield and take questions just as Chief Hempelman has done so far? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll get you an answer.
Thank you for the step stool for me. That's really helpful. I'm Sandy Anderson, and I live in the Broadlands. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council member, city leadership staff. I missed you guys the last couple of weeks, so I wanted to come up and make sure you know that I'd like to thank you all for all that you do, as it's well beyond what is understood, acknowledged, and you all deserve our respect and support. Mine is a simple message. It's all I'm going to say this evening. We count on you having the vision, the competency, and the acumen to continue Broomfield's progress in the dual roles of representing us as a city and a county. In closing, to all of our electeds, let me remind you that you were voted in. You won your elections and are who we chose to represent us. You have our trust, you have our support, and you have our vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sue Quimby. I'm just kind of on Waste Connection, where you guys approved. I was just wondering if you guys did your homework on this trash company. They're very unethical. I have a whole bunch of stuff for you guys to take a look at, especially in the state of Colorado. And also, out of the state. As far as I know, this place is from Texas. I had problems with them. So I have some handouts for you guys to take a look at. And I can't believe you guys didn't do your homework on this trash company. So, and they're very, very unethical, very terrible. And I had first hands at them, so.
Thank you. If you want to give it to Mr. Casey in the back, he'll make sure we get copy. Thank you very much.
Lois Vanderkooy, First Filing, and I use Waste Connections and haven't had any trouble with them. They've been ethical, so this brings me to the point of my concern about disinformation. There's so much that gets spread these days on social media and through certain news channels that really are causing us to be a divided community and nation. And, when people are complaining about what this council is doing, make sure that you are actually factual. If you're investigating what they're doing, be honest. Don't try to make up a big story about how corrupt they are. Similarly with Waste Connections, I don't think they're corrupt. And our staff did a long process of reviewing applications from other trash haulers and investigated all of them. So be honest, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to be heard in general public comment? Well, I don't see anyone online. So next under reports, we have Kyle Harris, McWhinney Real Estate, giving council an update on the Center Street District at the Baseline Development. Welcome, Mr. Harris.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of council. Thank you very much for inviting me for an update on the Center Street District project, a project that has been a bit of an odyssey as we are on iteration. I have no idea at this point, but we are excited. I was just mentioning to Jeff Romine just a moment ago, we're actually very close to getting a project that we believe is financeable and that we believe will create a great, vibrant atmosphere for this part of Broomfield. So I've also promised that I will be brief. So next slide, please. All right, just as a reminder, the Center Street project is located within the red boundaries that you see on the map. bounded on the north by Baseline Road, Highway 7, on the west by Sheridan Road, on the east side by what will be an extension of an interior road promenade, and then to the south-southwest by existing construction with the Davis Development multifamily project, and then a build for rent project just to the southwest. Next slide, please. So what you see here is the latest and greatest site plan. It does in some ways differ markedly from what you've seen previously, and in other ways it's very similar. In the ways that it differs, we do not have as much verticality, as much density as what you have seen in prior plans. And I can get into the reasons for that, primarily because more density would require publicly funded parking garages, which we just don't have the capacity to do financially within our current structure. So what you see here reflects between the grocer and the retail north of 200,000 square feet of retail square footage. We are with some trepidation, but we believe that there is a market for this moving forward with office in the first phase, about 76,000 square feet. And then we're also looking at just shy of 700 residential units. So what you see in the color up here is all reflective of phase one of the development. It is a significant amount to create a critical mass for the community. What is similar to what you've seen before is the roadway structure. We still have Center Street coming in off of Highway 7, creating a great shopping venue, and then leading directly down to views over the park and the future Butterfly Pavilion. You also have similarly on Road A, retail on both sides of the street, again, to create a great pedestrian environment. We're featuring on-street parking, and then you also have this plaza in the center of the community, really designed to create really the heartbeat of this area. Now, the shading of the buildings, the lighter yellow represents retail only. Those are typically single-story buildings. You've got the grocer, which anchors the corner on Promenade and Highway 7, and then any number of other retail tenants in those other light yellow buildings. The ones that have hash marks or diagonal marks, I think that's a blue color. I think there are 4 of those buildings. That reflects retail at grade, but office above. And so in some instances, it's single-story office. I think there's one instance where we're getting 3 stories, 2 stories above the retail at grade to create a little more verticality within the community. The darker gold reflects multifamily developments, and the gray that you see inside represents privately funded structured parking. Next slide, please. So what we are showing here is we wanted to give a sense of what the massing would look like with a combination of single-story and 2-story building structures. So what you see here is not necessarily the architecture that is going to be there, but it gives a sense of what the look and the feel of the place is going to be about. Clearly, the public realm is very important, and so there's going to be an emphasis on wider sidewalks, plaza areas, places where people can enjoy mingling, and then you get a sense of what the relationship is between the buildings and then that public realm. Next slide, please. So this is a list of tenants who we are actually targeting for the community. It is not exhaustive. Some of these we have had significant conversations with. Others are still on the target list and some are not represented here. But generally speaking, what we're looking to do is have an elevated center which has a focus on health and wellness and outdoors and home products, and of course, a good, robust food and beverage scene as well. So the good news is that we continue to have significant interest from amongst tenants in this particular project. Next slide. So timing. These never happen as quickly as we would like them to. What's critical for us is this, of course, the first date, April of next year, submitting the site development plan to city staff. And by the way, we are bifurcating the horizontal elements from the vertical elements. We think that is actually going to be, it's going to be more efficient for our team to do this. So that's why you see these bifurcated here. We would first start with the horizontal plans and then follow shortly with vertical plans. What's critical for us, and again, assuming that we are able to submit in April, have multiple rounds of back and forth with staff, is that we would be in a position to have a council hearing in that November timeframe, because what that sets us up to do is to hopefully issue bonds against the anticipated assessed value for the community. That would happen in the, call it December timeframe. That's critical because it then allows us to move forward with the horizontal construction, which would start then the beginning of 2026. Then we have the horizontal going in, and once we have enough life safety in place, we can start with the vertical. And we're now showing vertical construction on both the grocer, the retail, and the multifamily occurring over a 2-year period. So this puts that first very significant phase of the community up and operational in that summer of 28 timeframe. I did not go into much about what phase 2 is going to look like because frankly, we want to see what phase 1 looks like. There's an opportunity for doing more retail. There's an opportunity for further densification on residential. And if the office goes the way we hope it will, we could actually do a little more than what we're currently showing for a phase 2. So I think that about does it. So yeah. Any questions? If that's appropriate to ask.
Oh, yeah, no, thank
Okay.
you.
Good.
Thank you for the update and the new vision. We are going to have public comments on this, so if anybody would like to comment, please come on up to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hi, Roxy Jula Luckmore. Baseline is becoming nothing of what developer in the past with our previous council and our previous city management had declared their grandiose area and all the monies that they were going to bring in. I think dropping down to a 2-level building is not proper. This area is supposed to be built up and they can make it to where it is built properly. But as long as you guys keep accepting everything that they're doing, I know your hands are tied in many ways from the previous agreements that were made. But whenever it should be tightened, it should be tightened because you're losing taxes by putting nothing but apartments and houses and stuff into those positions. Sooner or later, you're going to have to pay for all the roads. You're going to have to pay for all the water. You have to pay for all the repairs. And if you don't have the businesses there to help you and to bring in extra money, you're going to be SOL just like you are right now with everything else that we're doing. You're going to be asking taxpayers for more. So if you can, buckle up and make it a little bit tighter. I don't care if they want 6 buildings. They get 2 for what they want and they have 4 that needs to be the way the project was supposed to be. Something, anything. Help the community without charging the taxpayers everything. Because you're going to be demanding it from all of us taxpayers. And we didn't ask for this. So you need to help your taxpayers out. Remember who you are here for. You're not here for you. You live here. You need to stand up for yourself and you need to stand up for the people who live here, the taxpayers. Those people up north aren't the only ones that are here. We were here long before they were even thought of. So try to stand up for us too.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to be heard on this item? Not, I'll go ahead to council questions. Are there any questions or comments from city council? Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Where do I begin? I guess I'll have my first question is, with the plan that you have put forth now, have you calculated what the average density per, is it acre? Number of dwelling units per acre it is, or number of businesses or employment per acre?
I do not have that at my fingertips, so we can certainly provide it.
Okay. And the reason I asked that question is, we've been trying to get BRT put on baseline. And in America, we need a certain number of people per acre in order to justify spending the money on it. And so I'm concerned that the either job density, residential density, a combination of both is not sufficient enough to justify, quote unquote, BRT on baseline. So that's just one of my concerns. My other concerns being baseline was sold, as a resident pointed out, as this kind of ex-urban, I think is actually some of the ads you've put on RTD buses, if I recall correctly. And it's supposed to be more of this walkable, friendly neighborhood in which you can just walk down the street and hang out with friends and go shopping and so on and so forth. And the proposal you put forth really doesn't reflect that. I know you said that there's potential to reinvest and put more office or other commercial and put more residential, whatever that may be in the future, but that's not a guarantee. That may not happen after you finish phase 2 and however many other phases you have for baseline. And then we're stuck in the same position of having a huge project with very little people or very little jobs in there. And then we are subsidizing it like we've been subsidizing suburbs for the past 80 years in this country. So those are just some of my concerns.
I didn't hear a question there, so did you have anything you wanted to respond to, Mr. Harris?
I think when we talk about BRT, there is, and I failed to mention it on the slide, there is the BRT stop, which we have incorporated into the plan. We are incorporating covered bike shelter, both at that location and in a location between the STEM school and the Butterfly Pavilion. And it may not be as vertical. Quite frankly, I would love for it to be more vertical as well. At the end of the day, if we can't make it happen at all, it will stay the way it is currently for however long. And I think I'm going to jump over to another thing. I think there is this misperception that somehow by doing this, we are sucking out funds from other areas of Broomfield, and I don't know that to be the case. Even with the retail that we're showing here, I mean, we can have the conversation with staff and I'm sure we'll go through a cost of service study, but I just want to I'm hearing that from the other residents who spoke, and I'm not aware that what we are doing is creating a burden on the city. So I want to mention that. The other piece is that ultimately we're looking at north of 7,000 residential units throughout the baseline community. I'm not aware of another area that has that type of density on 1,100 acres along the corridor. Maybe there are some, but I still think that this is very much, when taken in totality, I mean, 1,200 some odd units on 60 acres is assuming we do what we're looking at phase 2, which has one of the buildings not as dense as we'd ultimately like to go to. I still think there is a compelling argument that we are producing enough ridership potentially to justify the BRT, certainly relative to other stops that are along that line.
Thank you. Did you have a follow?
No, because we'll be here all night if I want to engage in a back and forth dialogue.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Marshall Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to echo my colleagues' concerns. Every time we've seen this project, it has gotten smaller and smaller. And I understand the reality of what you're dealing with as far as the market and the interest rates and everything else. I do understand that. I'm just concerned. We've heard, I mean, I know the Adams 12, the STEM school is years off, and that's partially because of how long it's taken this to get up and going. The Butterfly Pavilion may never happen. But we were sold on, I mean, the community was sold on this grand vision of a science district, and that's just not what's happening. I do like something more than nothing. I may obviously that, but one question I have is the office space. You have 172,000 square foot of office space. Do you really honestly think that you could fill that given the market for office space right now? We're hearing that our office market in Interlochen is going to take a significant valuation hit in the upcoming years. I just don't see how you could fill that kind of space given the market right now.
It's a good question and one that we've wrestled with internally. I think what you have to recognize is that not all office is created equal. And what you have in Interlochen is some legacy office, which is not amenitized to the extent of what we're talking here. We have had conversations with numerous brokers about the possibility of doing, and I should be clear, these are not 100,000 square foot floor plates by any stretch. We're really talking about much smaller demise spaces. Think, wow, if there was a 10,000 foot office tenant, that would be fabulous. But we're really looking more at the 5,000 and 6,000 square foot tenants. So it's a lot more of those smaller users who can take this space. And our brokers are telling us the one area of office where you have more than a fighting chance of being able to do that is in a place where it is a well amenitized, meaning you can walk to coffee, you can walk to the restaurants. It's walkable, it is bikeable. That is more leasable than just what you're saying, some of these very large buildings, large floor plates in more traditional office, which has struggled.
Okay, I appreciate that. Obviously, I have concerns of the density getting less and less, and I believe we need more and more density. But I do understand the struggles you're facing, so I appreciate you coming for us. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Anderson.
I do have a comments mixed in with questions here. So I just want to kind of take a moment to acknowledge that we have quite a bit of density already up in the baseline area. Most of the residents living in most of the residents living in baseline are in Ward 4. We're starting to see the first residents moving in east of Sheridan in Ward 5. And we have now met with these residents quite a few times to kind of hear some of their concerns. And what you're bringing forward right now is what these residents are asking for. And I think we just need to, clarify that this is not what you're proposing here is not just a whole bunch more housing. This is the retail and the commercial and that much needed grocer in Broomfield, because there is no grocer in Broomfield north of 144th at this point in time. So those are, I think we just need to make, I don't know if you want to say anything more about what you're actually bringing forward. That's not just a bunch more housing, that it is those amenities the residents are asking for.
No, I appreciate that. And if I didn't make that clear, I apologize. But that whole area along Road A and on Center Street, all that is retail on either side. Again, combined with the grocer, we're looking at over 200,000, I think it's 216,000 square feet of retail, which is still a significant project. And it is what we can do now. And, I would love for it to be more. I appreciate the comments. You guys are preaching to the choir. We would love to have more density. That is such a sustainability story. But what we're running into is the desire for density versus the reality of the financing. They are just hitting right now. And so staff tasked us with saying, hey, given the public-private partnership that you currently have with some tweaks here and there, what can you get done? What can you actually bring to the market? that still is a vibrant place that still meets the needs and the wants that we have heard from our residents. And we believe that this does that.
Right, and then a kind of a follow-up question, and it's more of a comment, I guess, is there's a strong desire for walkability and bikeability coming out of these residents, and I realize that there's a lot of surface parking to the north, but it still accomplishes, does it still accomplish that walkability and bikeability for the residents of Baseline and even further out to Palisade and Anthem and other areas? You still have internal routing paths and you can still get there, and it's just all we're adding is that parking lots are more the north, which isn't the area where they'd be biking, correct? Is that?
That is correct. All of the connectivity to the regional bike trails is still there. As I mentioned earlier, we do have the covered bike storage both on one of what we anticipate to be a biking portal, if you will, into the community. That's between STEM and Butterfly. The other one is by the BRT stop up to the north. What we don't have yet, but I think would be helpful, is to actually show some of the streetscape. What is it going to feel like to walk up and down these streets? And I mean, when I look at this, I see a sea of cars. I mean, I see exactly what you do, what you guys do as well. And next time we will come, once we have these further defined, we'll be able to show some more character images of what that looks like. But rest assured, I mean, this is all designed to be very pedestrian friendly. You don't see the width of the sidewalks. You don't see the outdoor patios. But to answer your question directly, Councilwoman Anderson, yes, all of that connectivity is still maintained.
Okay, and then this is, going back to that same heart of the matter with the residents who live up there who just want to start seeing this come forward. How much, if we don't start moving forward, how much longer can we delay? We're kind of at that critical point of, if we're going to see this grocery come forward and if we're going to see all this development happen, I mean, what does that look like? What is the timeline here to start to move forward?
We met with the grocer recently and they have a mandate to open stores quickly, and if we cannot provide that, then they go elsewhere. And that grocer is critical to the overall plan and the potential tenants that you saw on this list. I would also I would also say that a number of the retailers, the tenants with whom we are having conversations, they are publicly traded companies, and they make decisions about where they are going to locate their stores a few years in advance. But it's not 4 years, it's not 6 years in advance. They'll do it maybe 2, possibly 3 years in advance. And then if you can't meet that, well, you're just not on their radar screen at all. So we do feel a sense of urgency. You may laugh at that because we've been at this for however long, and I would totally understand that, but we do feel now that we're at a point where we have something we believe is financeable, that sense of urgency is real.
And I would reiterate, the residents feel that sense of urgency to start moving something forward because this is what they've been so looking forward to. And ideally, it would have been the original design, but this is still, from what I've understood, acceptable to those we've talked to. So the last question is, I don't know if you can provide us any update that we haven't already heard, but any update? I know this schools are a little tricky right now because we're seeing the declining enrollment, that's a little further out, but can you provide any update on the Butterfly Pavilion?
I emailed the interim CEO earlier today, probably waited a little bit too long to do that, but have not gotten a response back. So I do not have an update on the Butterfly Pavilion. And relative to STEM, the latest that I had heard is that Superintendent Gadowski is looking to have whatever bond issuance is required for the STEM school for that to be out just before, I think it's 2030. So if it is positive, construction would begin almost immediately thereafter. But you are correct, it is still a ways out. And the demographics have not been as conducive as we thought they would be. But he has told me that he still believes there is a need for the STEM school in this location.
Okay, no, that's helpful to know that it's still planned there and hopefully it'll come right at the right time. So thank you so much.
Right, thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem Shab.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to clarify that for the public, this isn't a concept review. This is just a update on a previous plan, but it looks like we won't get a concept review before April of 2025 with the horizontal SDP submittal and council hearing. Is that correct?
It's correct.
Okay, but we have had a concept review on the past on this. Is that correct?
It's correct.
Okay, all right. So with that, I appreciate the update. This isn't always something that we get where we see a concept review and then we get the SDP submittals and they're vastly different. So I do appreciate this update, both staff as well as the developer, for coming in and bringing us kind of an update before we see these dramatic changes that happen at the hearing. So I appreciate that piece. With that, there's always the sense of, this is not what we saw in the concept review. And I think that from what I hear you saying, you're not as pleased with, where that vision is, because I think that you all set out for that vision to be what it was in the concept review, what we saw. And I think council bought into that same vision. And so this is definitely not it. But can you tell us the challenges with developing kind of in this greenfield area, especially in Broomfield, and you've developed in Loveland, I believe, as well. The challenges that are there to provide a proof of concept to people that are financing these projects, and that you need to have some type of proof of concept, and that may be 2 or 3 story buildings, where what you would like to get to is going to be 8 or 7 or 8 story buildings. Can you talk about that kind of needing to provide that proof of concept to not only those people that are financing this project, but also the communities that surround these projects?
Thank you for the question. If I understand it correctly, you're asking, let me rephrase and see if I get this right. Are you asking, how do we go about presenting something like this to an investor group to get them to buy in on the project? Is that the question?
Yeah, that was actually going to be my second question. So, the first piece is there's projects that we see being built up in this area along Colorado 7. Many of these projects are 2-3 story, where a lot of those projects would like to be 4 or 5 stories. But a lot of financing that goes into funding these projects aren't ready to do that 4 or 5 story. They are only capping out at 2-3, because really that is what the market is surrounding this area. And so what is that challenge to be able to, and how do we get to that next level?
Okay, I think I understand the question, and it is actually less an investor or financing group saying, I really get nervous about 2 or 5 or 6 stories versus 2 or 3. It's more, what will the pro forma yield? And when you go above 5 stories or you change the building type, suddenly the expenses of that structure are far more, well, they exceed what the rents, because there's a relationship between, hey, what are the revenues that are being generated between what are the costs of being able to deliver the project. One of the things that we ran headlong into in this project is we wanted to have the residential directly above the retail. But in order to do that, we had to have podium construction, which is a different type of construction than if you were to do standalone residential. And that was extraordinarily expensive. It's not as though investors will say, oh, well, we don't believe in that product type. Or if we show pro formas that were realistic to go 10 stories, we go 10 stories. It literally is a question of what are the debt instruments that we can get, what are the equity returns, what are the cap rates at the end of this. All of this goes into determining what we can ultimately build. And of course, how much is available through the public-private partnership. And when we put all of that into the blender, some of those taller buildings that also have more significant parking requirements, I guess that's the other thing. You got to park the things, which is always the bane of our existence, but that is reality. So that has another dampening effect on how high we can go.
I appreciate that. Just like we're seeing out at Flatiron Crossing Mall, there's redevelopment happening there, where this is a project that's been around for decades. How does, when a project starts maybe like this, what does that look like in 30 to 40 years? Is it closer to that vision that you all had stated, or is this the project that exists for 50 years or 40 years, whatever however long this project is going to be around.
I appreciate the question. There is so much that has changed in our lives in the past 5 years. I can't even imagine what it was going to look like in the next 20 to 30 years. We try to enable I think what you're getting at, Councilmember Chef, is what is the possibility if this just blows it out of the water? Is there an opportunity for further densification of this place? Can we start to sort of 2.0 and what might that look like? That is a very good question, and I think that there are elements of that that can be redeveloped because there is the surface parking. I can't speak specifically to what those are, but when I look at this right now and I see some opportunities for further densification, but I can't tell you specifically what, that in 30 years, what it's going to look like.
And that helps to kind of understand that timeline a little bit as well. I mean, if we're looking at 30 years, that's the timeline for how quickly that project might change. But, I think you point to the surface parking that is there on the north, and you look at those little pad sites that are as well on that north site, with the bulk of the building and construction being right there to the south, kind of the middle area of this in the south. So I think that is where the potential for that redevelopment happens, and that's going to add to the densification, at least the look of the densification that exists up there. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lim?
This may be a question for staff also. So you identified that your target retail is health, wellness, outdoors, I think you said. I assume that you look at the market, broad market in the area to find that niche. So how much in your targeting is based on what you see coming in the future in Broomfield? So we have a number of large projects that will probably have some retail attached to them. So could you explain that thought process of that area for the health, wellness, and outdoors?
I think what we try and do, especially in this area, and when we look at and we consider Broomfield, it's sort of an interesting shape, and we look at the market area that's going on in the Flatirons area, is very distinct from the market area that we are looking at over in this portion of the community. Ideally, what we try and do is bring in tenants who will be perhaps new to market. Now, not all of these here are new to market. But we also believe that they are far enough away from what we know in other areas, so that the idea, and maybe what you're getting at, is cannibalization of sales. And can we do what we are doing in this portion of the community without cannibalizing what's going on in the other portion? And that is something that we look at. Yes.
And certainly I'm thinking about Broomfield Town Square also. I mean, we've been promised, part of that vision is new retail, new restaurants to the area. So, yeah, I'm just thinking of that as all of those projects go forward, how that will all fit together. My other question is, we have heard from you several times in different iterations of the phases of the different sections about, we don't know if we're going to do the inclusionary housing or not. Do we have an update on that?
Right now, we have included in the pro forma that we will have 5% of all the housing in here in this particular area will be inclusionary. So it is not the 12.6%. We will have to work on the balance outside of this, but there is inclusionary housing plan for the community.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick. Most of my questions have been answered, but I did want to follow up on, I think it was Councilmember Marshall Olson talked about this was originally a science district with the STEM school and Butterfly Pavilion to sort of set it aside from all the other retail up and down I-25 and the Orchard and Lark Ridge. It's all close by. Butterfly Pavilion seems quite iffy at the moment. And as we just heard, the STEM schools quite a ways off if it happens due to other factors and demographics. But is there a backup plan that if Butterfly Pavilion flies away, how else we can make this a distinctive destination. I know the residents, as Councilmember Anderson has mentioned, they've mentioned to me as well, you know, the walkability, and so there's certain factors they really are looking for, but to make this succeed, is there a backup plan if we have to go to a plan B or concept, how to sell this?
I would love to say that we had a backup plan for the Butterfly Pavilion. That is a pretty unique offering in the community. So no, we don't have a backup plan for that if it does not happen.
Are there any thoughts of what would go in that space if it wasn't there?
Can I get back to you on that?
Please do. Thank you.
Okay,
That's all.
thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll go back to second round with Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. One question that came up is some of my colleagues have been asking about redoing, basically doing phase 2.0. Does McWinney intend to retain ownership of any of the parcels after they've developed it? Or are you guys selling it off to, obviously the grocer, I may be buying the property, the rental units for housing will probably be sold off to a separate entity so they can own and manage them.
Yeah, I cannot speak definitively for each of the parcels, but I will say that it has long been our practice to do long-term holds, and that's what we are anticipating for the residential as well as for the retail. Again, I don't want to promise that because I can't. There may be an instance where there is, especially on the residential, a developer who's able to do a certain asset class better than we are. In that case, that would most likely be a sale. But the majority of what is reflected on this plan, we anticipate to own for a long period of time.
Okay. If you can't promise it, I don't want you to promise that you can redevelop it either, because if you're not going to retain ownership, then we're going to have issues like we have in Interlochen right now, where tons of empty parking spaces and no one wants to redevelop it because it's not financially conducive. And then I just wanted to make one more point about the walkability and bikeability. Just because you have trails and sidewalks and all that fun stuff there does not necessarily mean it's walkable and bikeable. Walkability and bikeability is a feeling as well as much as it is an infrastructure issue. So I just want to put that out there. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions from council? Well, I too was curious about the Butterfly Pavilion's future because we've all kind of heard they're in a bit of a transition. And that, I'm just gonna put it out there, that because of the delays in the infrastructure, that they want to move faster. And so they're actually looking at alternate locations. They don't have an application in process, so I did check with our attorney to make sure I could talk about it. But I mean, that's a big deal. That is still being sold as part of this project, and it's in all of the sales materials. When I toured some of the homes, it's in all of the sales offices, so, and the school. So I think it's important to, you know, get that updated, get that information, get some surety for all of us, because we're just operating under status quo too, even though, you know, we've heard in the background what's going on. So maybe we need to have a sit down with them and, you know, what does the future look like for this? Because we've committed to investing in this, and, you know, we should know too.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, 100% agree, and would love to have a sit down with the Butterfly Pavilions. It truly understands where they are in the process.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you very much for the update, Mr. Harris. I appreciate you coming in, and I think, oh, Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf had another question.
Well, thanks, Mayor. So I just wanted to follow up on the mayor's comment. So you had mentioned that the Butterfly Pavilion is a unique offering, and I would agree with you. There's not a whole lot of spaces like that, though it is part of the larger scientific and cultural facilities district that exists within the Denver metro area. So are there other aspects of that art, science, and cultural industries that you are bringing into Baseline that offer this more of a sense of community as opposed to just kind of the kind of stale retail and, you know, large shopping center, feel.
I hope our retail isn't stale,
Right.
but I understand the question. I think how I would answer that is that we have partnered with Cohere, who is a community management group. And what they do is that they help bring the community in Baseline out and to participate with the other organizations within Broomfield. So I'm kind of reversing your question, which is to say, no, I do not have another SCFD caliber group to potentially come into Baseline. But what we're trying to do is get our residents involved in other cultural offerings within Broomfield and the larger community through a group that is, quite frankly, dedicated to helping to do that.
All right, thanks for that. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr.
All right,
Howard.
thank you all. Appreciate it.
We'll be seeing you soon. All right, we'll now continue with the report section of the agenda. City and County Manager Hoffman, do you have a report?
I do not, thank you.
All right, thank you. City and County Attorney Rogers, do you have a report?
Yes, Mayor, we had a question during public comment about inviting DA Mason, and I think a couple of council members have mentioned that as well. I am trying to work on scheduling that with DA Mason, so we do hope to potentially have him here on the 22nd when the budget is considered, and then possibly in the new year for a more comprehensive update.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ms. Rogers. So council's consideration of the consent items is next. The clerk will read all of the consent items by title, and there'll be one opportunity for public comment and council questions and comments. Will the clerk please read agenda items 6A through 6C by title?
6A, approval of minutes from the September 24th, 2024 regular city council meeting. 6B, resolution number 2024-140, submitting to an application for and supporting Broomfield's participation in the Colorado's Creating Helpful Incentives to Produce Semiconductors Zone Program. 6C, request for executive sessions regarding the city and county attorney's annual performance review pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute, section 24-6-402 4F.
Thank you very much. We'll now proceed with public comments on the consent items, starting with in person. If anyone would like to be heard, please make your way to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record.
Hello again, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. John Ewalt, Pinnacle North. So this is on 6B, the CHIPS Act. Looking at the maps of the area, it seems like a good chunk of Broomfield is covered, but not all of the industrial areas of Broomfield. And it didn't seem like, I know we're submitting this to another group to then approve, but is there any downside to covering all of the industrial areas of Broomfield? And if there is, can that be shared? And then also, if there isn't, why are some areas left out? Thank you.
All right, we'll get you an answer. Thank you. Got that?
Roxy Jula Luckmore. The thing with the zoning for the semiconductors, that is a really good thing. And Broomfield has been semi-involved for many, many years, even back when I used to work. So I like this idea. The only problem is I know it's unlimited money. And Colorado's not getting all of the, I think they were like 800 and some billion dollars that was being put towards this. So that's got to be divided by many states, or at least 50. So I'm really curious about how much the county of Broomfield will be receiving of this money. Because I'm only figuring up maybe $600,000, and that's not really enough to try to get really big companies in here for semiconductor. We lost the one that was over in Lacomora for many reasons, but still yet we don't have it here like we did before. So that money, if that is even close to what I figured up, then that's not really enough money to get too many big companies, maybe to subsidize those that are already here. And as long as we have the zoning And as long as we can get the money to help out, this will be a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? We'll now proceed with council questions. Does any member of council have questions on this? Councilmember Lim?
Yes, Mr. Ewald, I asked a similar question already about how the staff chose certain areas of Broomfield. Could staff address that? They should be prepared from answering it earlier.
Mayor Pro Tem Council, thank you. Yes, when we met with state staff at OEDIT to talk about the maps, one thing they relayed to us was that we needed to look at areas and parcels in particular that had, higher probability either now or in the future of being used for semiconductor production or something tangential to semiconductor production that fits within the definitions of the state statute that lays out this program. So that's what we were looking at, why some areas are included, some are not. Another important point to make is that Broomfield can modify the map at any time. The program lasts until 2040 when it's eliminated by statute. But up through that time, the city can make updates if there's a company that moves into a space or is looking to move into a space and they would fall within these definitions. We can modify that map and make that modification to the state.
And could you please address the other residents' comments about that there be a limited amount of funding? I understood they were tax credits.
Correct. The way the program is set up is similar to the enterprise zone program through the state. So this is all through tax credits. No money is allocated to the city and county. Businesses have to pre-certify through the State Office of Economic Development to receive those tax credits if they have an activity that falls under the allotted activities that is eligible. So no money is allotted to us. The state allots, I believe it's $75 million per year that these companies can draw these credits from. And if that full $75 million is not used, that money can be rolled over to the next year. So the funds are allocated by the state, and we don't receive them directly. The businesses receive them directly if they have activities that fall under statute.
And do you have any idea if there's an expectation that there'll be so many businesses applying for these tax credits that some of them won't receive the tax credit? You mentioned the possibility of the rollover if it wasn't used.
It's still very early in the process. There's only 2 other communities so far that have received CHIP zone designations. That's Fort Collins and Longmont. And I haven't, the state hasn't told us. I think it's still too early in the process for them to know how much of those funds are going to be used year to year.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schreier, could you talk a little, sorry, the voice from above. Could you speak a little bit about how the location of our existing enterprise zones also was considered when we were looking at the CHIP zone locations?
Yes, so the way that the program's created, you can't overlap an enterprise zone with the CHIP zone. But since the tax credits themselves are identical, they're taken from how the enterprise zone works, you can market and businesses can apply for the CHIP zone credits if they're in an enterprise zone. So both zones kind of combine to make one large CHIP zone, if you will. But then businesses in the enterprise zone are still eligible depending on how they see their business. You know, they could go either way. It just depends on what would bring the best benefit to them.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Schreier. Any other council questions? All right, before asking for a motion, I want to remind everyone that item 6C is a request for executive session, which requires a 2/3 approval of council. Is there a motion by council that consent items 6A through 6C be approved? Councilmember Wynn.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? I thought you were going to hit your button. All right, no discussion. Council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes 8-0 unanimously. The first matter this evening relates to funding for drainage improvements for the Neeson Channel. There's one proposed ordinance for council's consideration, followed by a resolution for our Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority's consideration related to that funding. Before we proceed, we will convene the meeting of the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority. The meeting of the Broomfield Urban Renewal Authority is called to order to consider item 7B concurrently. I'll note that Authority Member Law Evans is excused and Authority Member Goldstein is present. The meeting of the, I said that already. Council and Borough have a copy of the agenda memorandums, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And it looks as if, although we have three names, that Mr. Romine is going to introduce us to this item and give us a brief presentation. Mr. Romine.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members and borough members. I'm just going to run through one presentation that'll cover both items as you consider them and vote on them. I would also note that Katie Allen is here, who's the city engineer, and she is here in case there's technical questions related to the drainage or the Neeson Channel project specifically, as Rebecca Baker is not here, not in the office today. Carl Front is also here to answer any legal questions. Next slide, please. So as many of you know, we've been working on the Mile High Flood District with the Mile High Flood District on the improvements for the Neeson Channel. This is phase one. This is a section of the channel that we're preparing to move forward on from Tennyson to Lowell. The purpose of improving that channel is there is obviously stormwater overflows, creating a floodplain, as well as potential risk for life and or property assets. The Wasatch Residential Group is the primary developer in this section that we're talking about tonight and owns the property immediately to the north and to the south of the channel as it currently exists between Perry and Lowell. So many people know that area as the former drive-in, the Broomfield Drive-In Theater property, and that project has come forward to City Council at one point as a concept review. They are working on their due diligence now. We have met with them recently also about the development, and they're preparing to move forward, completing some of their pre-development activities. The channel improvements have a benefit both to the property owner as well as to the city and county of Broomfield and the public in general. And so this will allow the development to proceed as well as addressing the public access and issues that oftentimes are in this area. Next slide, please. The map shows up in the upper right corner the property that we're talking about specifically in the section that is related to the Wasatch residential group. It shows on the main slide that's showing is actually the distance for phase one, so going over to Tennyson and then moving over to the city boundary. So you can see that area. You can see the way that the channel is currently operating, something like a snake. And it does flood into those areas, as you can imagine, when there's high water. Next slide, please. The drainage improvement project is going to be funded 50% by the Mile High Flood District. Through there, as you know, they do receive property taxes from across the region, including Broomfield, and the property owners within Broomfield, and 50% that will be funded by the city and county and the property owners. The adjacent property owners. The underlying financial of all this also includes the URA, so it's the Lowell Gateway Urban Renewal Area that we'll be talking about specifically. That was formed in 2013 and includes this area as well as other areas near this channel. The proposed development will generate, as it moves forward, is expected to generate both property tax. And as council has indicated, you're seeking for some commercial on the front side or the south side of the property facing 120th. And so it is expected to generate additional sales tax also. In modeling what they are currently proposing as a development, we anticipate that the $1 million that would be lent from the developer to the city and county of Broomfield for this project would be repaid through the tax proceeds that we anticipate coming to Borough over about a 3-year period, maybe as long as 4 years, but we expect it primarily being paid for in 3 years after construction begins. And so it includes the use tax, the sales tax, and the property tax, those all coming forward. Obviously, we are leveraging through these local dollars, both the city funds as well as the private developer, the Mile High Flood District funds, which are in place right now. So that is what the purpose is. That's where the funding is coming together and how it comes together. Next slide, please. The agreement specifically calls for the Wasatch Group to provide $2 million in funding. $1 million is their contribution, and they're effectively lending us $1 million so the project can proceed in a timely manner. It will be paid through these proceeds, as I mentioned. There is an 8% interest rate that's associated with it that will be drawn down or will be added to on the outstanding balance each year. So as we've modeled it, we've modeled that interest rate also being in and recognizing how that flow of funds will occur both through the use tax being paid a building permit as well as the occupancy and property taxes are collected. And so you can see how that kind of falls through and exactly what it is. So 50% of the use tax will be used and 50% of the property taxes that will be generated from this as well as the sales tax. But we believe that all of this will likely be paid through the property tax and the use tax. That's how it models out. The obligation ends in 2038 and as I mentioned before, is anticipated to be covered in a short period of time. Next slide, please. So the actions before, sorry for the typo, it should be a double S in the Eastern Channel. But it is calling for two actions, one by the city and county of Broomfield and one by the borough. I would note that there's a second reading that will be scheduled on the city and county of Broomfield's action on that ordinance, and that'll be done on November 12th. So a future date, there'll be a public hearing on that date. The borough action only requires one vote. So at that, I conclude my presentation, and we are here to answer any questions council may have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Romine. We'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in person. If anyone would like to be heard on this, please make your way to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello again, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. We're just going through the slides that were posted earlier, and it shows the obligation ends in 2028, and I think that was different up here. So I just want to call that out, and I'm sure that some of these questions have already been asked, but I'm asking them anyway. The interest rate at 8% seems extremely high, and especially for a city with the credit rating that we are supposed to have, it seems like we should be paying a much lower interest rate than that. And this may just be my misunderstanding, or maybe need some clarification, that the use tax and the real and business property taxes generated from redevelopment, what's the time span of that 50% being refunded to the Wasatch Group? Is it a one-time thing, or is that ongoing for multiple years? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Romine, would you like to address that while we're on that topic?
Yes, Mayor and Mayor Pro Tem and council members. So it will be paid back over the term, and once the obligation, the $1 million obligation is fulfilled with any additional interest payments, but all of that will be fulfilled. Then at that point, no additional funds will be going to the developer for repayment. So it terminates at the end of that final payment.
Thank you. Seeing no further comment, we'll go to council questions and comments. Any member of council? Councilmember Marshall Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions. There's already construction going on in that area. Is that related to this project? I've had a resident reach out. I assume that's what it was, but there's earth moving and such.
Good evening, Katie Allen, Co-Director of Community Development. Yes, Mile High Flood District started the project late August, and they're able to start when a project's not fully funded in anticipation of those revenues.
That's what I thought. Thank you. And that's what I told the resident based on the website. And then one quick question. You mentioned the proposed development in that location between Perry and Lowell. What is the timeline for us? Are we seeing another concept review on that? Because we've seen several, or is it just going to be an application submitted?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Councilmember Marshall Olson. Right now, the developer can proceed on the property on the north side of the channel. and can move forward immediately and move toward an SDP and then permits. They are still contemplating whether they want to go for a rezoning on the southern portion separately or do it as a full development. And that's really what they're at right now within their conversation at their corporate, or at their development side. We did talk with them last week and reminded them of those two options, that they could either proceed immediately on the north side or they can move forward and seek a variance on the south side as part of a development or independently. I just wanted to clarify also, while I have this chance, the URA in that area expires in 2038. That's the reference to the time period. We anticipate this being paid off in 3 to 4 years after development. So assuming development begins and construction begins sometime in late 25 or 26, which is what the developers indicated to us, then that would hit that timeline that we were talking about, the 2028 period. So I apologize for that confusion, but we're trying to give an indication of when we expected that debt to be paid off.
Okay, so on the northern section, was this SDP approved on that previously years ago, or was it just the rezoning?
Mayor, council member.
Yes.
I can take that question in my role as co-director for community development. Yes, the north half of the property has an approved site development plan for a residential project. You have seen a concept review that would require a new site development plan if they were to proceed with that for both the north and the south.
Okay. Do we know the timeline of when we anticipate that coming forward?
We have not been told an anticipated submittal date yet.
And I guess my question goes back, do we expect on the southern part, do we expect to see another concept review? Or do you think it's just going to go to an application, since we already saw concept reviews on it?
I would defer back to Anna because she knows the process far better than I.
To answer the question is a little challenging just because we're not sure if they're reconsidering. If it's a far departure from what you saw previously to concept review, we would advise them to go back through the concept review process. It may be an online concept review in that case if it's a change. But if they're proceeding with something that's similar to the prior concept review, we would allow them to move forward.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So looking through this, there was the combination for the Broomfield portion was a combination of the CIP and the contributions from developers and the private property owners. Do you have the breakdown for what that is, for how much is coming out of CIP versus the contributions from developers and private and property owners? And that's fine if you don't have that tonight. I'd love to see that. I would like
Mayor
to
Pro
see
Tem
that.
will provide that information to you prior to the second reading.
Awesome, thank you. Another question, that question's been answered. So development is anticipated in 2028-ish or so. The other question that was raised in public that I wanted to make sure that we get a clear answer on, interest rate at 8%. I would want to believe that we could get a lower interest rate than 8% from, a different lender. Is it just easier to go with the lender as the Wasatch Group? I think that's how you pronounce that. It may just be easier, but it comes with an 8% interest rate.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, as you can imagine, in order for us to go borrow money, it would require a whole different series of actions by the city, and for us to go borrow $1 million specifically is far below what we normally would do. So in this particular case, to expedite this project and move it rapidly forward, this was the direction that we felt was the most financially prudent. I do understand the comment about the interest rate. However, the developer is putting themselves out at risk. And so we're reflecting, if you think about it in the sense of they're putting $2 million out to move this project forward, waiting for the development to come, you could almost arguably suggest that it's a 4% interest for the 2 million. It's really the million that we're borrowing, but it's the million they're putting out ahead of time, which is a capital risk for them.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Anderson.
Okay, so I heard a slightly different question. In Mr. Ewald's question was like the repayment. How would is that like on a monthly basis, annual? Is it as we receive funding, we can make bigger payments so we can relieve ourselves of that 8% faster? Like if we had it all within a year, we could just pay it off, correct?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, Councilmember Anderson, yes, the way we would do it is like we do with any other reimbursement that we do with the developer, we tend to do it on an annualized basis. However, we can do it as we receive the money. So the use tax would be the first money that would come in, that would be become available with it for that property upon building permit issue. The next would then be the property taxes as they begin to move forward. So we've modeled it based upon the timing of when we expect those funds to be coming in. And again, we expect the development, given what our most recent conversations with the developer, to likely move forward in 2025 and possibly occupancy and completion in 2026. So we believe that it will hit the 2028 time period for repayment. But if it goes into 2029, we'll obviously be, whatever the outstanding amount is, we'll have earned interest, but we'll pay it as soon as we possibly can. It is clearly in our incentive role to move as quickly as possible with repayment.
Okay, and I'm assuming that Wasatch Residential Group, if they're going to do these improvements right now, like they put all this money forward, that they are anticipating moving forward rapidly. But is there anything in the contract that states that if they delay on the development, like what if they delay and what if they don't bring forward the plans as quickly as possible and they don't start to develop for 3 or 4 years? Is there any requirement that they have to do that within a certain time frame?
Mayor Pro Tem and council members, just to some degree, they would argue, or not argue, but they would ask the question from the reverse side. Broomfield City Council has the authority to make the decision about any variances or any other things. And so the control is on both sides a little bit, and the uncertainty of when the development moves forward is on both sides. They have indicated, based upon our recent conversations with my colleagues in the planning department, and we had a call with them last week, they are planning to move as quickly forward as possible. Them putting $2 million into the investment or into this development indicates that they're committed to moving quickly forward. So they've owned the property for a number of years. The only true investment that I would say that they've made, other than maintaining the property, was the demolition of the former projection building. So this is a pretty significant investment indicating their desire to move forward quickly.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Roman, I want to go back to the interest agreement that we have. You made a comment that you can, if I remember correctly, you can think of this as they're putting forth $2 million and we're having basically a 4% interest on the $1 million we're giving back. That those numbers didn't compute in my head when you said that. So can you clarify if, since they're putting forward 2 million and we're going to reimburse them 1 million, are we paying interest on the 2 million, or is it really just we've agreed to the 1 million as the interest for that? And because the comment you made just really threw me,
Thank
and
you.
I'm sure it threw some other people off.
Thank you. I'm sorry for any confusion I may have caused. So from the developer, I was speaking from the developer's perspective. They are bringing forward pretty quickly, we'll call it today, $2 million out of their own funds. Obviously, those are all at risk. Those are in some ways from the development standpoint, and they are pulling those from whatever reserves or whatever accounts they have. So that's their expenditure. We are borrowing, we are receiving $2 million. 1 million is their obligation for this project. $1 million is the amount we're borrowing, putting into the project at the same time. So it is only $1 million that will be repaying, and only the interest on the $1 million. I was trying to explain or suggest the example of for why the interest rate was where it was, is because they are coming out of pocket right now, $2 million in advance of a project moving forward.
Okay.
So I apologize for that confusion.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification.
All right, thank you very much. And Councilmember Marshallson.
Thank you, Mayor. More I'm thinking about this, the more I actually do have some concerns. When does the interest start accruing?
The interest would begin accruing once we receive the funds. And so at that point, it's an 8% annual APR, so it will begin immediately.
I'm going to tell you where my concern actually comes from, because I understand that they want to get paid back, so they're gonna want to move forward. But in the past, they've come forward with concept reviews that weren't well taken by council. So mainly because of the lack of retail on the southern side. Is there any requirement that they bring, I guess, what if they bring forward something that we don't like? And are we just then accruing interest forever if it never gets developed? How does the repayment work long-term in that concern?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, we put together the financing and the agreement related around the fact that they'd be moving forward with the development. The most recent version that we have seen of what they're proposing does include retail on the south side of the property. It's a question of how much in that sense, and we can't forecast, nor can we affirm that city council will approve whatever may be presented by them as we move forward. So in that sense, there is uncertainty. There is no doubt. The certainty that we have is the project, that the channel project moves forward and begins to provide the public benefits and support and clean that up. Also, as you may note from looking at some of the materials in the past, it does improve access and walkability within that immediate area. And so it's the primary concern or the primary focus where we have come forward with this is around moving that project forward that has been long needed and wanted and does still present a public health risk, a public safety risk in that area. So
Right, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind that the floodplain project is what we absolutely need. My concern is over the interest rate. Just, you mentioned that we don't normally go out, we don't borrow that type of small amount. If we were to not finance it through them and just did it on our own, how much, best case scenario, do you think we would save in interest payments? And how much would that delay the timeline?
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, I can provide my quick analysis during the next review of this at the city level. So that'd be November 12th. At the same time, the alternative, which we really have not pushed forward through, but the council could consider would be utilizing CIP money in a future year to pay this off. We feel that this is the most effective manner and stretches the city's resources and finances to create the greatest good out of those. But there are alternative options that we could take to pay it off. There's nothing on their side that says we must pay it off with this. It says more of how we would pay it off. And we've worked through the details of what we consider a very likely and reasonable approach for financing this.
So if they came forward with a project that we didn't like and we didn't approve, we could find a different way to pay it off.
That would be a city manager's recommendation, city council action.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. That's all, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions from council? What, does someone have something?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Like anything on the books, the sooner you pay it off, whether it's 1%, 2%, from a cash perspective, I mean, staff could come back at the first budget amendment and designate those dollars for a priority, particularly because the project's already started. I'm looking at Katie Allen back there that has her head in her hand. This is important, not only from outside of the development, Councilmember Marsh-Wolshin. So the fact that they know that this does not buy an approval, but it is mutually beneficial. So how we fund it, yeah, the sooner the better, and not being beholden to the developer.
All right, thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, we'll move forward to the vote. This item has two matters. First is council's consideration of the proposed reimbursement agreement. So we'll tackle that one first. Will the clerk please read the proposed resolution by title?
7A, ordinance number 2256, approving a reimbursement agreement for the funds advanced for the drainage improvements for the Nissen Channel.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on first reading and ordered published in full? Councilmember Marshall Olson.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward.
Second?
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously 8-0. The second item related to this matter is borough's consideration of a resolution approving the reimbursement agreement. Will the clerk please read the proposed resolution by title? You can have a moment if you need. You're good? Okay.
7A, resolution number 2024-154-UR, authorizing and approving the second amendment to the City and County of Broomfield's budget for 2024.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution? Councilmember Nguyen?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward?
Second?
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Borough, please cast your vote electronically. Authority Member Goldstein, please state your vote verbally.
Aye.
Thank you. All borough members have entered their vote. And the results will be displayed on the screen in a second. It's a new panel. Ah, there we are. And that passes 9-0 unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Romine and Anna and everybody else. So the next item under action items is a resolution authorizing an agreement with Eide Bailey LLP for independent audit services for fiscal year 2024. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Thank you, Mayor. And this evening, we get the pleasure of hearing from Bernie Block, our auditor in process improvement, as he was an integral part of selecting the auditor and what happens next. Mr. Block, please introduce us to this item and walk us through it.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Colorado law and City, County, and Broomfield Home Rule Charter require that all of the City and County of Broomfield accounts be audited by an independent accounting firm at least on an annual basis. Requests for proposals were issued in August of 2024, and 3 qualified accounting firms submitted proposals. An evaluation team scored the proposals and interviewed all 3 of the firms. Best and final cost proposals were requested from Clifton Larson Allen and Eide Bailey. The evaluation team determined that Eide Bailey provided the highest value-based option and recommends that council authorize an agreement with the firm for the fiscal year 2024 independent audit services. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for that brevity. So we do take public comments on this. If anyone would like to be heard, please come up to the podium, state your name and neighborhood. I don't think there's anyone online either. So questions from council are next. Does any member of council have any questions? Councilmember Lim.
I was going back in my records to see when we last changed auditors. So at least looks like we selected Reuben Brown in 2019. So is there a cadence to this that I didn't see anything in the memo that indicated, okay, our contract is up with them, or was there a decision that we needed to move in a different direction?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Lim. Actually, Reuben Brown has been our independent auditor for the past 8 years. The 2019 was the 4-year renewal. It is generally a best practice to periodically change audit firms. That being said, there's no hard requirement. In Reuben Brown's case, they're a partner after the 4 years rolled off the engagement, which is one of the reasons we continued with them. We had what we felt was a good working relationship at the time, and after 8 years, we feel that maybe a fresh perspective would be good for the city and county.
Okay. I need a clarification on when we vote on this, if we were to approve this agreement, are we approving it up through 2027? Because there's charges listed up through 2027.
Yes, it would be for the audit of the 2024 financial statements, but the agreement would also, the proposal provides an option for 3 years. So we would have the option at the pricing provided to renew for the next 3 years if we chose to do so.
Okay, and council would not be involved in that approval process. It would be an automatic renewal.
That is correct. I think that is something that is done with staff.
Okay.
Yes.
There was a indication that the reason that this auditing firm was chosen was that they had experience with the enterprise resource planning system. And then there was also a note that they indicated that they would be willing to spend more hours with the staff in that process. Did I interpret that correctly?
I don't know about necessarily the additional hours. I mean, I think that would just go in hand with the ongoing work that they proposed on. But having experience, in-depth experience in that area is an area of interest for us because over the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to be going through some significant change and it's going to impact our finances, and having a qualified firm that can help guide us from an audit perspective through that process will be very important.
And Councilmember Lim, if I may add, so the extra hours and the availability of those extra hours isn't just for the ERP. So if council remember, one of our findings that was for 2 years in a row was the complexities around human services and the grants. And part of our last contract, because we didn't have help us understand it, help us design it, how can we not have these repeat findings? You had to go back and get a contract extension and scope and add that in. Whereas now we have the capability to be able to say, help us understand on the front end so we can prevent those findings on the back end. And they were very eager to be able to do that.
That's good.
We have additional partner and manager, higher level experienced staff on their end available under this agreement. And we felt that was important for the reasons that Manager Hoffman mentioned.
And this is just a clarification for me. How does the auditing firm determine what the single audit program is? Is there a cycle to that? Is that something that?
It's based on level of federal funding, and I believe that threshold is 750,000. I might be wrong, but we are anticipating 3 internal audit, and 3 single audit programs for the 2024 year. So yes.
Because of we're expending ARPA funds.
ARPA funds, yes, that was what put us into the 3rd this year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from council? Seeing none, next is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2024-159. Will the clerk please read the proposed resolution by title?
Resolution number 2024-159, authorizing an agreement between the city and county of Broomfield and Eide Bailly LLP for the independent auditor services.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution? Councilmember Ward.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Lim.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, council members, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That did it? I know it passed. Oh, there it is. It's a little delayed. It passed unanimously. All right. The final item this evening contains a resolution and the first reading of an ordinance related to Broomfield's withdrawal from the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, which I'll ask our staff to summarize.
Filler, while my computer puts up again. I shouldn't have closed it. Mayor Pro Tem and Council, Nancy Rogers, the City and County Attorney. We're here tonight to end a process that was started in late 2019 for Broomfield to withdraw from the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority. Next slide. All right. I know some of you are very familiar with this history, but I thought for council and for the public watching, we'd go over a little bit of the history. In May 2008, Broomfield, Arvada, and Jefferson County entered into an intergovernmental agreement. It's called the Establishing Contract, and that established the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority, which is a separate governmental entity. It was established in order to build a tollway segment that would, to some extent, start to close the loop started by C-470. Fast forward to 2019. In December of 2018, council heard the budget request from the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority, which was over $2 million. That started a discussion that went through 2019, which included a lot of feedback from members of the public and members on council at that time about concerns with building a parkway near the former Rocky Flat site. At the end of 2019, and let me tell you, there's many meetings in between, and I don't mean to diminish the work. I'm just trying to do a short summary. There was a public meeting with City Council about a soil sampling study, and there was a result from the soil sampling that was hot. And many people were very concerned about this. And there was continuation on the budget discussion because the idea from the JPPHA, the Highway Authority, was to move forward with the next stages and needing that multi-million-dollar support from the governmental entities, Arvada, Jeffco, and Broomfield. Following more of those discussions in late 2019, in February of 2020, City Council adopted a resolution that was a notice of intent to withdraw from the Public Parkway Highway Authority, which would mean that Broomfield would no longer be a party to the contract and would no longer be involved with that project. The letter from my predecessor was sent to the parties the next day. From 2020 till present, there's been negotiations on these terms of withdrawal. The establishing contract, the IGA, requires that there's unanimous consent from the JPPHA board members, which is 2 votes each for Arvada, Broomfield, and Jefferson County, which means Arvada or Jefferson County could not impose terms that Broomfield wouldn't agree with, and Broomfield also could not impose terms that either Arvada or Jeffco would agree with. So the requirement for unanimous consents really makes negotiations very interesting. In June of 2022, Arvada and Jeffco filed a lawsuit that said that they believed that by issuing the notice of intent, Broomfield was breaching the agreement and that we had certain obligations we had to do under the contract. We filed a motion to dismiss and the court agreed. The court agreed with Broomfield that the case wasn't ripe yet because no decision had actually been made. No party has actually ever voted on Broomfield's request to withdraw from the parkway. No party, Broomfield included, has imposed requirements on another party. We continued our negotiations. So, which got us to this point. So here we are in late 2024, where the representatives from Broomfield, Arvada, and Jefferson County, as well as a representative, the legal counsel for the JPPHA, remember it's a separate legal entity, have come together to come up to terms of withdrawal that in conversations with our clients, we believe is acceptable to all the parties. And that's what we're going over tonight. Broomfield is, I believe, the first entity to have their meeting, but Jefferson County and Arvada will also be having public meetings to vote on these terms. And then in December 2024, JPPHA's board will consider and vote on these terms, and that would be the last vote. If that happens, Broomfield will no longer be a member of the Public Parkway Highway Authority, will no longer have any responsibility for or involvement in the Parkway project. Next slide. As a reminder, this is generally the plan for the Jefferson Parkway. The section for Broomfield is number 9. That's in the top right-ish corner. The 10 is actually unincorporated land. That 9 is right here. Next slide. A more specific map created by our GIS department shows the Broomfield property, the Broomfield jurisdiction lines in blue. The 2 parcels we'll be talking about are in yellow. The specific right-of-way easement is that black line. So that's the property we're talking about. It is north of the Great Western Reservoir. Next slide. I'm going to go over the main terms of withdrawal, and there definitely will be time for questions, so I don't mean to go through this quickly. I know that there's a lot of detail in the memo. There's also this slide deck, which is available for the public who want to slow down maybe and look at it in more detail. Well, first, there is going to be transfer of property, but it's going to be a delayed transfer of that right-of-way that I was just talking about. There's going to be a payment of $636,000 to the JPPHA. There's an agreement, a proposed agreement that Broomfield utilize good faith, which means not arbitrary and capricious permitting and approval decisions for those decisions that Broomfield has to make for that land that's within our jurisdiction. There's an environmental mitigation exhibit. And then there's a needed approval by JPPHA to actually allow Broomfield to leave the Parkway Authority and amend our agreement with the Parkway for reimbursement. I'm going to go into more detail on each one of these. One of the last terms that we get is a mutual release of all claims. As I mentioned, there was a lawsuit on this, and it was dismissed because it was not ripe. It was premature. It doesn't mean it couldn't be filed again. Part of this agreement is a release by Jefferson County and Arvada and JPPHA to release Broomfield for any claims they might have related to Broomfield's withdrawal from the Parkway. Next slide. All right, I'm going to go into a little more detail about each of those key terms. About that transfer of land, in our negotiations, there was talk about when do we get it? Of course, the other parties wanted it now. We wanted to transfer it much later when there was movement on the Parkway. We came to an agreement that we would put it in escrow. So a third party would be holding it for 5 years. It's a 3-year escrow agreement with a 2-year extension. The property would transfer to JPPHA at the end of that 5 years or sooner if JPPHA signs a concessionaire agreement, a concessionaire transaction. Concessionaires are the large entities, large companies that run these tollway projects around the nation. The property reverts to Broomfield, though, if JPPHA is dissolved or if the establishing contract is terminated. So let's say in 2 years, the other 2 parties decide they don't want to move forward, they dissolve, the property reverts back to us. Another reversionary interest. So at the end of 5 years, the property transfers to JPPHA automatically, even if they don't have a concessionaire agreement. But we have a 20-year reversion interest. So if there's no concession agreement by that 20-year point, that means the property comes back to Broomfield. And if during that 20-year point, JPPHA dissolves, that property comes back to Broomfield. Next slide. I'm going to go a little more into the payment, about $636,000. I will remind council that the 2018-2019 request for budget was over $2 million. The demand in the lawsuit was 13 million. Where we got this number of $636,000, and I know that's still a substantial amount, it was $400,000 for past contributions. Broomfield had planned in its budget to allocate $400,000 to JPPHA in 2019. That was prior to the request for $2 2 million plus. 183,000 of the 636 is 1/3 of the soil testing costs that happened in 2019. And 52,000 of it is for ongoing contributions. I mean, Broomfield has been a member of the JPPHA these last 4 or 5 years, and there have been operating costs as far as auditors, outside legal. There's other expenses that JPP had to incur. And so during negotiation, we came to a preliminary agreement that Broomfield would pay its third. Since this time, just as a comparison, Arvada and Jeffco have contributed 328,000 combined to JPPHA. So they're covering more of the operational costs than Broomfield is for these last few years. Next slide. All right, more about these permitting restrictions. I said good faith, and good faith is a term that always needs to be defined, right? And we made sure to not utilize the word good faith. It just is a little more common way of describing this, because only lawyers say arbitrary and capricious, and I'm going to say it like 4 times in the next 5 minutes. So what we're talking about when we mean good faith permitting approval decisions is that anytime a Broomfield has to process a permit or grant something for grading or do an approval, and some of these might be administrative, they cannot be arbitrary and capricious. And as this council is fully aware, because I say it all the time, that's a standard that you always must apply when we're talking about the type of decisions you have on land use. So this was just putting it into contract terms and making a contract requirement. Some of this agreement ties to approval of permits on adjacent properties cannot adversely affect the development of the parkway. The intent here is that Broomfield will not, without a reasonable basis and without being arbitrary and capricious, make a decision that would effectively kill the parkway in their permitting decisions. So that's the effort here. Prior environmental testings cannot be the sole or primary reason to deny any permit or approval. I want to be very clear about that term. That's prior environmental testing. We'll talk about environmental testing that's going to be mandated by the contract going forward, but it would be those prior environmental testings that could be the sole or primary reason to deny or any permit or approval needed. And then there was a request by the parties that Broomfield won't take any action that causes a portion of the parkway to be designated a flood hazard area, that land that's in our jurisdiction. We vetted that with our city engineer and don't really have a concern about that request. There is penalties for not acting in good faith if you have that arbitrary or capricious conduct that is proven in a court. Then there are penalties written into the contract. So really a deterrent and a contractual requirement that Broomfield always act in good faith. And there's actual damage if construction is delayed as a result of that approval. Now, a couple of things I want to point out. Remember the map. We're only talking about approvals applicable to Broomfield's jurisdiction. Of course, Broomfield doesn't have a say in the approvals down south near Candelaris. That's not in our jurisdiction. So we're really only talking about that square that's up in the top northwest. Next slide. All right, more about the environmental exhibit. So Exhibit E, and it's in the packet, has specific requirements to help mitigate and monitor some of the environmental impacts. This includes dust control, air quality monitoring with a monthly review of the data, compliance with all laws and regulations, which you might be thinking, well, they have to do that anyway. Now it's a requirement in the contract. So in addition to any action that could happen by the state or other regulatory entities, we've made it a contractual requirement. Required soil sampling plan and soil testing. An important provision is a halt of construction, which means JPPHA, if during construction they get a hot test, they cannot restart construction without CDPHA approval if on soil testing there's a sample that has 50 picocuries per gram, or for air, this is an exposure measurement. It's 25 milligrams per year. And this is a measurement that's used by OSHA and by, I didn't write it down, Joel. the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to monitor exposure levels for people that are at, near, or working at areas that might have contaminated environments. There's a material management plan that's required, and then monthly public reports and public notice requirements, and that's all in Exhibit E. Next slide. Those of you that are familiar with this area, and if you've driven by it, you might be thinking, well, this is open space. And it is undeveloped land right now, but I want to talk a little bit about why it's not necessary, it's not open space as that term is designated and protected in our charter. So this land was deeded in 1985 to Broomfield for open space, but also many other uses. And that highlighted area indicates that uses could include development of park and rec needs, of party of the second part, which is Broomfield, highway or street or roads, right-of-way, ag uses, public utilities, buildings, structures. So while this property can be used as open space, it's not, as our charter defines open space, intentionally protected from development or set aside for unstructured recreation. So I just wanted to put that out there for those who might think this is open space, you can't do this. Our deed actually allows for a highway roadway use for this land. Next slide. All right, the key documents. This is a complicated sort of big packet of agreements. First, we have the withdrawal agreement. Again, this is effectuating council's intent to withdraw from the Parkway Authority and to no longer be involved with this project. It is an IGA, so it requires a 2/3 vote of council. There's Exhibit A to the withdrawal agreement is the amendment to the establishing contract, which actually takes us out of that IGA. Jeffco and Arvada would still remain parties. Exhibit B is the amended reimbursement agreement. One of the original concepts on the establishing contract is that the parties that helped started the JPPHA would, should the parkway be built, should it become a revenue generator, would eventually get reimbursed for their investment. Broomfield has not lost that right. This Exhibit B amends that reimbursement agreement and still maintains that should the parkway get built and there be revenue sufficient to reimburse the original parties, Broomfield would still get a reimbursement of the funds that it had put in. Exhibit C is the escrow agreement for the deed. The deed itself is an Exhibit D, and then Exhibit E is that environmental mitigation and management plan that I mentioned. That's Resolution 2024-136. Ordinance 2251 is the actual conveyance of property. As with public land, we have to do that by ordinance. So this would be first reading tonight. And then next slide. Second reading would be on November 12th. We do expect Arvada and Jeffco to consider this and vote on this month or next month. And then, like I mentioned at the start, in December, this will be on the JPPHA's board meeting agenda. That is all for the presentation, Mayor. Thank you, and we're open for questions. I'm here. I really have to give a quick shout out to Joel Heine and Pat Gilbert. Pat, who's been working on this issue since it started from the very beginning, 2018, 2017, even before that. So I want to thank you both for all your help in this. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Rogers, and I would like to echo that. Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf and I have been on this journey with you since 2018. So we'll now proceed with public comments, starting with in-person. If there's anyone who'd like to be heard on this item, please come to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I've been part of this since the beginning and before the tollway was coming through. I am happy that we're coming to a conclusion of finalizing. It couldn't come soon enough for me. So if we have to wait 20 years, I guess that's what it's going to be. Just like I said before, you know, I don't like giving away money, but even from the beginning when this was brought up, I said, I don't like giving away money, but if we can get out of this, we need to get out of it for our benefit, our children's benefit, great-grandchildren's benefit, everybody's benefit. So if they end up going ahead and finishing it, it's not because of us. And that is the only good thing that will come from it, is that we are finally going to have some type of closure with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I don't see anyone online, so questions from council are next. Members should limit themselves to questions. Any questions from council? Councilmember Marshall Olson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple questions for staff. My understanding of the current proposed, if the parkway was going to be built, the current plan doesn't actually connect on either end. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and so do we have an idea of, just for the public's edification, of the likelihood of this actually ever being built?
We do not. I mean, I think there's opinions on both sides, with some people believing this is going to get built and some of us believing it might not. I mean, there's a lot of work to be done to get this off the ground.
Councilmember Marshall Olson, I think the key to that, without reading between the lines or speaking in code, that gap there was a $40 million escrow account initially for the contractor and/or subsidiary to use part of those funds. And if it wasn't built in a certain time period, those escrow funds went away. So you're looking at a full, not just from the Jefferson Parkway, but also that, I don't want to say last mile connection because it isn't a mile, but essentially that would be an enormous financial hurdle, along with having to do the environmental, having to go back through all of those check and balances again.
So if we stayed in, basically we'd be paying money each year to the authority for a project that has us not a high likelihood of actually being built.
That's your statement, not mine.
Thank you. That's all, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from council? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So a question. So you had mentioned that there was no involvement or decision-making by Broomfield and the Jefferson Parkway moving forward if this were to pass. But we will continue to be a partner in the reimbursement process if the project is developed and if the project makes money in the future that would enable those reimbursements to be made for those past costs. Is that correct?
I would word it a little differently, Mayor Pro
Fine.
Tem. JPPHA has an obligation to reimburse Broomfield if there are the revenues to do reimbursement. And so we don't need to monitor their revenue. We probably will, just if they are making money to make sure we get reimbursed. But yeah, that would be an obligation that's on JPPHA. If they fail to do so, we take our legal action under the contract.
Great. And these expenses that we're putting forth tonight, will those be categorized as reimbursable expenses?
Yes, those are included.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing no questions, first is council's consideration of proposed resolution number 2024-136. Will the clerk please read the proposed resolution by title?
Resolution number 2024-136, approving a withdrawal agreement, including exhibits between the city and county of Broomfield and the city of Arvada, Jefferson County, and the Jefferson Parkway Highway Authority.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the resolution? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Schaaf.
Thank you, Mayor. So just disclosure, I am the Broomfield appointed board member to the Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority. Wanted to just talk about the money contribution. I agree with our public comment that I don't like giving away money. But when I break down this about $600,000, the $400,000 was what was agreed to by a few previous councils. And so this was what was owed in 2019. The $183,342 was Broomfield's share of the testing that was agreed to for 2019. And the $52,000 is our portion of the 2023 expenses. that's the one that, you know, kind of gets under my skin a little bit. I don't like to spend that one, but the way in which I've looked at that is that there were expenses that were for those previous years that were not done, such as the auditing that we are finally catching up on with that Jefferson Parkway Public Highway Authority. So I can rationalize some of that, that those are for previous expenses that we were a part of when we were part of the board, or that since we have been a part of the board. So I agree, but I think that, you know, in terms of the funding, it's a lot less expensive than $2.5 million that was requested of Broomfield in the 2019. And so I think that this is a good agreement. I appreciate our negotiators for helping to go to this, and I look forward to council's direction for that December JPPHA board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Marshallson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to say that before my time on council at the 2020 hearing to withdraw, I did speak in opposition to that. I did think that the parkway should be built. I still think that the parkway probably should be built, but only in the context that it actually completes the loop and is done in an environmental safe way. I cannot support staying in the parkway at this point, given the fact that we're spending, basically throwing good money after bad, because it's likely never to get built in its current iteration, and it wouldn't complete it anyway. So I'm going to support this tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Ward.
Thank you, Mayor. Unlike Councilor Marshallson, I don't think this should have ever been built. And I will continue to preach that till the day I die. But I do want to just thank our legal staff for working on this tirelessly for the many, many years that we've been at this. I think we've come to the best agreement we possibly can with the other three entities. So I'll be voting yes.
Thank you. Any other discussion from council? I would just like to reiterate my gratitude. This has been a long and arduous process, so I appreciate all of your hard work, everyone, in trying to get this to the finish line, and I'm happy we'll be able to close this chapter. Thank you. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2251. Will the clerk please read the, oh, we did that. No, we didn't. Did we? Yeah, we did. Okay. Yeah, no, I lost my place. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move forward to the vote on ordinance number 2251. Council, please cast your vote electronically. Yes. Yes. But the script says ordinance. Did I move? I lost my entire spot, y'all. I'm sorry. Okay, we got that. Now here we are. There's a missing line. It threw me off. So there's no more discussion. Thank you. Council, please cast your vote electronically on the resolution. All council members have cast their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously, 8-0. Next is council's consideration of proposed ordinance number 2251. Will the clerk please read the proposed ordinance by title?
Ordinance number 2251, authorizing the delayed conveyance of property via a special warranty deed and subject to the terms of an escrow agreement to the Jefferson Parkway Highway Authority.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance on first reading and ordered published by title? Mayor Pro Tem.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Ward.
I will second reluctantly.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem Shah?
Thank you, Mayor. So I do appreciate our negotiators and legal staff for coming up with this agreement. This is one that I believe was talked about from the get-go in terms of what becomes of the land obligation. So I think that this is a great improvement to the possibilities for what that land transfer looks like. So I appreciate all the creative work that went into getting to this agreement. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing no further discussion, council, please cast your vote electronically. All council members have entered their vote and the results will be displayed on the screen. That passes unanimously 8-0. Thank you again. I'm clapping in my head. All council members, okay, so there are no requests for future action this evening. Is there any other business to come before the council from my council colleagues or staff? There being no further business,